This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Set to get into it in this episode with Ken Boessenkool, Shannon, Phillips. This has been our Friday tradition, part of our game plan through this federal election every Friday. And typically the spot for our Real Talk Roundtable, we check in with the team members from Meredith, Boessenkool, and Phillips. You can check out what they do at mbpolicy.com. The benefit for you, we take a look at the week's headlines on and off the campaign trail. You'll get a perspective from kind of 2 points on the political spectrum. We'll spend some time in the Real Talk live chat digging into it as well, and hopefully get to a point by April 28th where every single one of you feels like you're making the most informed vote possible. We're going to talk about the death of the carbon tax. Carbon tax, rest in peace. You'll remember that Shannon Phillips, who will be joining us in just a moment here, she was Rachel Notley's cabinet minister, the one that rolled out the carbon tax in Alberta. How does she feel about the fact that there's basically, we don't use this word a lot in Canada, but bipartisan support. There's support across political parties to kill the carbon tax. Does Shannon have mixed feelings about it? Is she lamenting it? We'll find out, and we'll find out, Real Talkers, what you have to say. What about Mark Carney's alleged ties to China? Have we spent enough time talking about that? Closer to home and off the federal campaign trail here in Alberta, you may have seen a story flaring up, the official opposition NDP criticizing Danielle Smith's UCP government for using a law firm to what they assess is interfere in the Auditor General's investigation into this CorruptCare scandal. That's what the NDP's calling it. Is this business as usual? Both Shannon and Ken have served at the highest levels of provincial governance. We'll get their take on that. And a fiery edition, we promised you, of the Flamethrower presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Real Talkers are staying on top of election headlines, and you're giving us your absolute best, your absolute hottest takes. We'll wrap up today's episode with that. Let's get it kickstarted officially with a big shout out to our presenting sponsors today, and that is the team at Rello, where better real estate training starts. This is Alberta's top online real estate school, bar none. You can find them online at relo.ca. You can learn more about Rello itself, dig into their online real estate courses, and better understand what they're offering, including real estate exam prep, whether you're looking at residential or commercial real estate, or maybe both. You know, you got to write that exam. You got to get licensed. You got to get ready to go. And not everybody passes right away. This is not a joke, as my buddies say. That's why the team at Rello makes sure that they have a group of experts, industry folks with years and years of experience to answer all of your questions around the clock and make sure that you're all set up to succeed right out of the gates. You can check out the different course offerings at relo.ca. Don't forget, if you're looking at the two bundles, trying to make the most of your investment, the Alberta Commercial and Alberta Residential Real Estate bundles, you can knock $100 off each of those with the promo code Ryan100. That's all one word, Ryan100, when you get started today at Rello.ca. Shannon Phillips, former Alberta cabinet minister, a longtime MLA out of Lethbridge, Alberta, and Ken Boessenkool, a longtime conservative strategist and self-described policy wonk. He's worked in provincial politics in BC and has been an advisor to a couple of high-profile Canadian conservative leaders, including Stephen Harper and Preston Manning, both of them spending their Friday mornings with us through this election campaign as partners at Meredith, Boessenkool, and Phillips. And it's nice to see you both. A good morning to you. Ken, last we checked in, you were on the slopes. I think you were in Kimberley, taking like an hour off to talk to us. Where do we find you now?
I am about an hour north of Shannon, assuming she's in Lethbridge, in the county of Vulcan, where I have a little house on a lake.
Oh, fantastic. Shannon, are you at home in Lethbridge right now?
I'm in Lethbridge today, and the kids are off to school, and so you won't hear any alarms or other yelling in the background.
We don't mind. We welcome alarms, yelling, interruptions, dogs, cats. We've seen it all here on Real Talk because we're all about real life. Why don't we start just with a quick hit on what the top election issue is, or what the buzz is where both of you are joining us from. So, Shannon, we talked a bit about Lethbridge, actually, last Friday, whether or not former Mayor Chris Spearman could win one. You indicated, that you respect Mr. Spearman's political career, but that he's got a tough slog ahead of him, considering the surrounding areas around Lethbridge. That was your take then. What are Lethbridge residents talking about this week right now?
Well, it's become really red out there in the city of Lethbridge itself, and lots and lots of sign locations, and lots of energy. And last night when I was driving my kid to Scouts, I noticed four. Count them, four households that had both the Liberal and the NDP sign on their lawn, which to me shows that probably these are longtime New Democrats who are used to voting NDP in provincial elections, but everybody knows Chris as well, so it's a very small town dynamic whereby you don't want to make anyone mad, and you know everyone, and it does go to show you, though, the way that ordinary people, think about politics is not the way the pundits and others think about politics, right? Especially in smaller cities where, relationships and everything are much deeper, and everything is much more personal.
So there's going to be I don't know why I wanted to say little old ladies. That's right. I think I'm picturing the raging grannies, and I know that some of them hail from the southern parts of the province, but there will be longtime volunteers. I'm thinking of the old guys that have been knocking on doors for 30 years for the federal NDP, and they've seen the ebbs and the flows, and they've never cast their vote for anybody else. But right now, when they're having coffee with each other and when they're talking, they're probably like in hushed tones, maybe even saying, we can't split the progressive vote. Like, if we're going to have a shot at beating the Conservative here, we're all going to have to vote for the Liberals, right, Ken?
It's more than that. Every time Danielle Smith opens her mouth, people on the center or on the left edge of the Conservative movement say, do I really want more of this? Like, do we really want in Alberta to send a whole bunch of Conservative MPs? And I don't think Lethbridge is going to go Liberal because the boundaries are really difficult there. But I think there's, every time Danielle Smith opens her mouth, another riding falls to the Liberals in this province. And she was at it again at the Manning Centre last night with her silly threats about separation and all the rest. And there's a lot of very patriotic Conservative voters in Alberta that just don't like that. And they know they're not voting for or against her. But boy, she's doing Mark Carney a solid just about every day these days.
Well, what do you think's actually? I'll ask both of your opinions on this one, but Ken, is kind of the Conservative on our panel, let me ask you first. What do you think she's actually up to? What do you think she's doing? There was a time where if she was heading down to Mar-a-Lago or whatever it is, and the threat of the tariffs was kind of hanging over us, and all the premiers, the first ministers, most of them minus her, were meeting, she could at least justify the trip. And then there was like the PragerU thing, and I guess you could kind of justify it. And then now she's out at the Manning Center, and it's kind of like, I think a lot of people are kind of wondering, what's this media tour all about? What do you think the end game is?
So I think it's manifestly in Alberta's interest to elect a Pierre Poilievre government. I think if we want to get things done that Alberta wants to get done, Pierre Poilievre is the right answer to a lot of those questions. Mark Carney has moved in Pierre Poilievre's direction on a number of things, like wanting to get pipelines done and the single window approval process. So he's like a soft, moderate Poilievre, but really it's in Alberta's interest to elect Pierre Poilievre. That is clear, but it is in Danielle Smith's political interest, to elect Liberals in Ottawa, because she's in big trouble. She's got this healthcare scandal hanging over her head. She needs to change the channel. She needs to figure out something else to talk about. And if she gets Carney in Ottawa politically, I'm not saying it's in the best interest of Alberta, but politically, that's to her advantage. And so I think she's actually quite happy to have a Carney government in Ottawa so she can continue to change the channel away from all of the disastrous things she's doing running this province and this little healthcare scandal where I think at the end of the day, it's going to be very bad for her.
So to be clear, Ken, are you saying that you think that she is actively campaigning or actively trying to ensure that she does everything she can to make sure that Pierre Poilievre does not get elected?
Look, she's got a chief of staff who has written that the path after the Sovereignty Act is separation. So she's being advised by people who think the natural progression of this crazy trip that they're on is to go to separation. So I think there are people who actually believe that they want to move towards separation. But I also think those people are perfectly well aware that in the rest of the country, this kind of stuff drives votes to the Liberals. And Pierre Poilievre is a difficult opponent for her, whereas Mark Carney is like poster boy for grievances and the kind of grievances that she loves to dwell on.
Shannon, what do you think's going on?
I think there's a bit of that. It's hard for me to, engage in too much psychologizing of Smith or her premier's office. I will say that obviously, tactically and strategically, it is in her interest to have a grievance-based Liberal government, because then you can blame the Liberals for all of your problems, right? Stub your toe. Well, that's the Liberals' fault. And we've seen this. It's a game as old as time here in Alberta. And the one time that they lost power was at the tail end of the of Stephen Harper's prime ministership. So there's also a bit of a data point to back that up. I also think that she likes attention. And she really, really wants attention from that far right flank. And that, too, is a way that she has consolidated power internally. She is not Jason Kenney. She has not tried to ride two horses. She has ridden one horse, and it is the far right populist vehicle to holding that party together. She has kicked out more moderate voices, or they have been silenced, or they have silenced themselves because ultimately they've shown themselves to be fairly weak in standing up against the further right, more Trumpy elements of the UCP. So that's the horse she's on, and it works for her. It raises her money, it gets her attention, and she's going to ride it until she's out of the premier's office, no question.
Edmonton Whitemud MLA, obviously one of the prominent NDP opposition MLAs in the Alberta legislature, Raki Pancholi, took aim at Danielle Smith's government in the Alberta legislature. They're calling it the CorruptCare scandal. This is the Auditor General's investigation into procurement. This is what we've spent weeks and weeks talking about. Everybody knows it, and it goes back to the skybox, the luxury box tickets at Edmonton Oilers playoff games, and masks and PPE and Tylenol and all of this. And, well, it sounds like, or at least Raki's trying to, shine a light on alleged shenanigans in the Auditor General's investigation. Here's what she said.
Yesterday, a senior ADM with Alberta Health sent out an email to the entire Alberta Health staff which says, quote, the OAG may reach out to you for an interview as part of their investigation into AH and AHS procurement processes. Please redirect the OAG representative to our legal counsel, Rose LLP, end quote. This smells like a cover-up. The UCP are using a law firm to control which Alberta Health employees are interviewed by the Auditor General in the CorruptCare scandal. Why is the Minister of Justice allowing the government to interfere in an active Auditor General investigation and disregard the laws he's responsible for?
So that's Raki Pancholi. Shannon, how unusual is it for a law firm to be involved in this capacity, or is it business as usual?
It's pretty unusual, I would say, and for it to be external legal counsel, one of the reasons for that is they gutted the Alberta Justice staff some years ago, and as a result, a lot of conservative friends and external law firms got nice, big, juicy contracts, and so there's that piece of it. It's pretty unusual to send out like an all staff to AHS at Alberta Health. Like that's a pretty big distribution list, and so a bit indelicate, I would say, on the part of government. I think the OAG will still be able to access the documents and what they need regardless. But the better way to be able to get to the bottom of this thing is obviously a public inquiry, which the UCP are not doing. They're doing sort of this fake inquiry process. The much more fulsome investigation can come from a public inquiry because it can compel documents, compel testimony. It is quasi-judicial and is much more professionally managed.
Shannon, for us plebs that don't know how this works, what's the difference? Like when someone hears the Auditor General's looking into it, they go, "Oh, good, it's being audited." What's the difference between what the AG is doing and what a public inquiry would look like?
Well, the AG can't really find, any kind of, I guess I wouldn't even say criminal, but like sort of violations of administrative law, anything like that. They can sort of do value for money and procedural audits, right? Where all procedures found. So he can the worst thing that he can say at the end of the day is not all procedures were followed. Right. And then hand things over to some sort of investigation process. So it's fairly limited in its scope by necessity. That is the job. And it's also backward looking. It can't really look at what's happening right now. And so, it is an officer of the legislature. It's by necessity quite limited in its work, which is sort of as it should be. because the last thing you want is officers of the legislature actually interfering in how policies are made and how decisions are made, to take kind of the other side of it, which I know Ken is going to. So, it is a tool for accountability of the legislature, but it is not the only tool. The fact that the government is even trying to really micromanage this process shows me that there's probably something under the hood there.
Alberta Girl in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says, as somebody that's been involved in annual AG audits, I can tell you that involving these lawyers is not normal. Alberta Girl says, this sure looks like a clear cover-up to me. Ken, your thoughts on this? What's one thing you're really keeping an eye on as this process unfolds?
Everything the government does on this tells me that they know they're in the wrong. When it comes to the Auditor General, there are norms, and the norms are we participate in these audits. We participate voluntarily. And the fact that they're breaking those norms and bringing in lawyers tells me, once again, that they feel like they are awfully worried about being found guilty. The third thing I'll quickly say is, look, the Auditor General finds accounting irregularities. It doesn't look for all kinds of other irregularities that, if you've been following this story, are obviously are quite seriously being looked at. And so, we were asking Shannon about the difference between a public inquiry and the auditor. Like, if there's accounting irregularities, let me give you a quick example. If some health facility out there got contracts for $25,000 for a surgery, and some other one got $2,000 per surgery. But before that was done, the department said, we have a very wide range of certain ways in which we can contract this surgery. Then there's no accounting irregularity that happened there, because within the policy bounds, you're allowed to do $25,000 for some and $2,000 for others. But I think if you ask yourself a bunch of other questions about why some get $25,000 and some get $2,000, you'd want to know some deeper answers to that. So maybe that's too technical an answer, but I just think the Auditor General is limited on the kinds of things that they can look into. And if the allegations in this story are anything close to what we've been reading about, it's much more than an accounting irregularity.
If all the allegations are true, then what, Shannon?
Well, it's pretty serious stuff, and it's pretty stinging indictment of the government's approach to healthcare, which is people's number one issue after the economy. And therefore, that is a gift to the NDP and an opportunity to the Alberta NDP. They have had a hard time punching through because, obviously, all the Trump stuff takes up all the oxygen out of the room. And that is the case for opposition parties across the country. No question that when these big national, international news stories take over, it's really hard to get people to pay attention, particularly in this current media environment, to smaller, more provincial, in both senses of that word, preoccupations. However, there is big dollars at stake in an issue that is top of mind for Albertans. And is the healthcare system getting any better? It is manifestly not. And so there is no question that this remains a massive opportunity for Alberta's NDP opposition if they can harness it.
All right. So the Toronto Star today has a headline that reads, carbon tax Carney nickname sticking to PM, but not in the way that Mark Carney hoped. Here's another headline from CBC back in March. Carney kills consumer carbon tax in first move as prime minister. The carbon tax is, in a way, factoring into this election, but probably not like the Conservatives hoped it would with their long ballyhooed slogan, axe the tax. Shannon, you're in a very interesting position of serious credibility and insight here as the cabinet minister that rolled out the carbon tax in Alberta under Rachel Notley's leadership. How are you feeling about the fact that NDP supporters, Liberal supporters, Conservatives, pretty much everybody appears to be keen on getting rid of the carbon tax?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're talking about the retail carbon tax because Alberta's had an industrial carbon tax since 2007, 2008, when it became full implementation. That was back before we had just a whole bunch of, disinformation, essentially, on the merits and how it works around carbon pricing. Now, in my view, retail carbon pricing was always going to be a far too tough a political conversation, and I was never fully convinced of its merits on the political side. It might might be the best public policy, and it probably is if you want to reduce emissions, because it is not a regulatory approach. It does essentially conform to free market principles. It's why guys like Ken Boessenkool have always been supportive of it. But the fact is that the Economist Party is not on the ballot. Regular political parties are, and they have to go talk to ordinary people. And when you lose a political debate, sometimes you just have to decide that you've lost and move away from it. That is what the federal Liberals should have done. I'm glad that the Alberta NDP at around this time last year really severed that tie as well, because ultimately, folks, we live in a democracy. And so if the people don't like something, you're not just going to keep beating them over the head with it and showing them your charts and graphs, and hopefully, they come around to being as smart as you. That is a terrible place for a political party to put itself in. Progressives did paint themselves into that corner. It took away other abilities to talk about other solutions to climate change, or talk about even the environment more broadly, protecting nature, all of these things that are actually popular, right? And so I'm glad it's gone. And I think it's infinitely hilarious that Mark Carney is the one getting the credit from voters on this. The fact is, it is gone. It is done. It has. They've taken away the nail bat that the right has been using to beat progressive parties with now for several years. They're going to move the goalposts and find something else to talk about or complain about or be the object of their grievance politics. It's probably going to be industrial carbon pricing, which is going to be a competitiveness problem and a problem of business conditions going forward for both the oil and gas sector, the broader mining sector, value-added, petrochemicals, you name it. Industrial carbon pricing is actually really, really important as part of our underlying business conditions. But, Danielle Smith doesn't care about any of that. She's just going to move the goalposts and go to war on that topic now next.
Live chat powered by Park Power. Ken, to you in a quick second. Angie says having a low-leveled carbon tax on huge polluters is insurance to trade with all countries in Asia, like Japan, EU, because they'll not trade at all unless you have climate action. You absolutely need it. Tracy says political parties should evolve. Mark Carney will evolve policies. Please think about yourselves and your family's voters. Look at platforms. Ken, over to you.
2 quick points. Number one, carbon tax is issue number 110 in this campaign, where issues 1 to 99 are Donald Trump, 99 bottles of beer in the ball. 101 is healthcare and 102 is education, but 110. So it's not an issue. Number 2, I love David Coletto. He's a friend of mine. I've ridden bikes with David Coletto. But can I just read you the questions that he asked for this poll? Which do you credit more for removing the carbon tax? Mark Carney and the Liberal government for making the change, or Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative opposition for pushing for the change? Like, that's not a good polling question. I love David, but David was trolling for a story, or the Toronto Star was trolling for a story. I would have answered that question with Carney.
Okay, Ken, what's the better question?
An open-ended question. Who do you credit for the fact that there's no carbon tax? Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney?
Okay.
Like, it's like making the change versus pushing for the change. Well, the guy who made the change is going to get the credit. Sorry, David, you torqued that one to get a story, and your other credibility is all awesome. I love you, man, but that's a torque.
Well, I mean, I kind of feel at this point on poor carbon tax that it's sort of fair ball, right? Because the entire thing's been torqued for over a decade, and it's just been the subject, the object of just absolute garbage political discourse and a complete unmooring from policy reality. So as the carbon tax gets buried 6 feet under, even still, the dirt that we're throwing on it is potentially not grounded in the best approach to public discourse, to public policy, and to public opinion. It's really too bad because, first of all, it might be issue number 110 right now, but climate change is not going anywhere. It's been cyclical for the last 20 years in terms of how it is top of mind for folks, and it will come back. That's number one. But number two, to the point that folks were making in the live chat there, it is, and as we are trying to diversify our trading partners away from the United States, who obviously are not interested in action on climate change right now, they are interested in having more climate change, like quite literally. But everyone else that we want to trade with, yeah, you bet your boots that they want to see some climate action. And if we don't, they are looking at, in the case of the EU, border carbon adjustments, right? So if we want to make sure that we've got the broadest possible options and optionality for our commodity exports, we have to have some thoughtful climate policy. And Danielle Smith can lie to herself all day, and I guess lie to her voters, but that remains the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I would humbly suggest that if Lytton, BC or Jasper was burning as we speak, or had burned 2 weeks ago as opposed to July or a couple of summers ago, this might have a different look on the ballot. No doubt Donald Trump and the relationship with the states is number one, but human beings, we have limited capacity on what our most urgent issues are, and I'm not taking away from people who's, for whom climate is issue number one. More with Shannon Phillips, Ken Boessenkool in just a moment. You can find out what they do. I love this from Super Chat Ken, by the way, you two. Super Chat Ken threw $5 in our Super Chat, which means a couple of cold beers in the Real Talk beer fridge. And he says, what a pleasure to watch two intelligent people who have diverse perspectives not only work together, but clearly respect each other. He says, this is wonderful to watch. So Ken's loving what he's seen from Boessenkool and Phillips today.
I love Ken's loving Ken's in the chat.
There you go. Look
They're
at that.
just Ken's.
Oh, take us into it, Johnny. I'm picturing you in a pink convertible right now.
I'll play some other
Absolutely
music.
nailing it. All right, well, why not give there? I like this one. As we have more good news to deliver, especially to the golf enthusiasts in the audience. Our friends at the Ranch Golf and Country Club officially open for business on Tuesday. That's right, my friends. April 15th, opening day at Alberta's #1 public course. If you've not yet played the Ranch, make plans to at the very least, get out there on Thursday, the 19th of June. That's going to be the 4th annual Real Talk Golf Classic in support of the Julie Rohr Scholarship. The Ranch, the #1 tournament course in the province, without a doubt, 120 tournaments a year they roll out, which means their team is more experienced than anybody else. They can help you with sponsorship packages, customizable tournament packages. They nail it on the steak dinner every year for us. If you're in charge, your group, your organization of the golf tournament, make sure you reach out to the team at the Ranch and get your date set in stone today. What a great conversation we had with Marshall McAllister just the other day. A few days ago on our show, you're looking for the episode, Are We Headed Toward the Great Recession? Marshall's the president at North Road Investment Council, gave us some great insights into what was happening with the markets. At that point, they were way down. And if you took action on what Marshall threw out there, by the way, you probably had a pretty good Wednesday. Marshall talking about the different positions that investors were in and how that should influence how you're processing what you're seeing with the impact of all those tariffs. This is what Marshall, Kerry, and their team does at North Road Investment Council. A steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. Plus, they're the only ones in the space. Anybody in the province of Alberta will tell you this. Financial planners, wealth managers, financial advisors. Nobody else is doing digital risk advisory services. They are. You can learn more at northroadic.com. And Johnny, what a fantastic family dinner we had last night at Friesen Brothers Glenora. Didn't feel like didn't feel like cooking. Didn't feel like spending $250, which is how it can get when you take the family out, right? So we go into Friesen Brothers. They had the hot food ready to go. I got the beef short rib with the horseradish. Nothing new there. Kerry got some avocado toast from the grill, which is very nicely done.
Yeah.
Wyatt got his smash burger. Noah Bear got his grilled cheese.
Wyatt is a burger baron.
Oh my gosh, he is just can crush burgers like you would not believe. The sides, the warm potato salad, we absolutely loved their garlic parmesan fries. And at the end of it all, the two kids got the free kids soft ice cream cones. How about that? You can't beat the price, can't beat the experience. If you feel like taking the day off from making dinner, think of your friends at Friesen Brothers in 16 different Alberta communities. What's going on here?
Just a little note on the carbon tax, no matter who gets credit. The saddest thing is we had like in the last 27 years, we haven't lowered emissions in Canada. And last year we finally did it. We finally had a little tick down. It kind of evened out because we exported more, But we had a lower in emissions in the last 27 years. It was lower than ever before, excluding the pandemic years where obviously nobody was driving or whatever. So I think that, hey, Ken's
I know, Kenny, we'll wrap up your thought and then let Kenny jump in.
No, go ahead. He's got more info than
I was going to say, if you want to have a whole show on who killed the carbon tax, Shannon and I will be on for that. Because
Happily.
we have some overlapping but very different views on who killed the carbon.
Okay, well, let me tell you this for you two, and we'll take our audience here behind the scenes, behind the curtain. The only time constraints with this episode is both of yours. So if you guys want to go into a little more depth on the carbon tax before we move on, we've got you sitting here. We've got all morning, quite frankly. What do you want to spend 5 minutes on it? I mean, Ken, who killed the carbon tax? Let's dig in.
So, as you said off the top of the show, I did a stint in BC. And when I first went to British Columbia, I was like, hey, I was a typical conservative. Hey, let's kill the carbon tax. And I went to Christy Clark and said, hey, maybe we should kill the carbon tax. And she said, well, maybe do some focus groups and find out what people think about the carbon tax. And in BC, when I went around to conservative leaning voters and I said, hey, why don't we get rid of the carbon tax? You know what their response was? But then my personal income taxes will go up. And I don't like that, because I'm paying a little more at the pumps. But they remember that Gordon Campbell cut their taxes and they didn't want to get rid of the carbon tax because they made a link between the taxes that were cut and the carbon tax that went up. And Shannon is a good friend, and I don't mean to disparage her too much, but in both Alberta and federally, when my daughter got her first $100 check from the government of Alberta, she called me and said, Dad, why am I getting a $100 check? And I said, let me take a picture of that check and send it to my friend Brian Topp, who's the chief of staff to Rachel Notley. And I sent the check to Brian Topp and I said, you are losing, buddy, because nobody knows the connection between the carbon tax and these rebate checks. And the same thing federally. And I think it was a crime against politics that both the Alberta government and the federal government didn't. I would have cut the GST. Like, can you imagine if you would have, every time the carbon tax went up, the GST went down? Can you imagine how hard it would have been for Pierre Poilievre to say, I'm going to raise the GST by 3 or 4 points to get rid of the carbon tax? This is what they should have done. They should have made a direct connection between the taxes people pay and the carbon tax. And if they did that, they would have had it here today. So who killed the carbon tax? Justin Trudeau and Rachel Notley and Shannon Phillips.
Oh.
Well, I do think that the certainly the delivery mechanism of those rebates was, I mean, we were just given the absolute bullshit runaround by the banks, by the civil service, by everyone involved, right, on how to deliver these rebates in a way that people would understand what they were for. It took the federal government essentially 4 or 5 years to get it labeled on people's direct deposit, to Ken's point, which, you know, which was just people fucking around is what it was. And, you know, like they essentially, I think they had to like pass legislation or some damn thing to get it done, right? It was just completely bonkers. So in that sense, yeah, people understand a tax cut a lot more than they understand a random check arriving or something that is just labeled deposit on their bank statement online, right? I think that's absolutely the case. And that was, I think, an own goal by both the provincial and the federal. Like if you are going to, but people didn't understand in the first place the concept of a rebate to offset their carbon tax, which is why it was smarter to just cut the taxes in the first place, because that they understand.
Okay, you know what? You guys still, go ahead.
You could still do some of the other things that Alberta did with the money, because I will go to the barricades to defend this part, which is that we didn't rebate it all. We didn't even rebate as much into the upper income as the federal government did. Why? We kept more of it back for energy efficiency and for industrial efficiency, which is actually where Alberta's emissions profile is growing the fastest and the most, to the point that was made earlier, right? And there are really actually low-cost emissions reductions to be had on the industrial side, in energy efficiency. And at the time when we were making these decisions, you have to remember that WTI was in the absolute toilet. The provincial finances were not great. We did need government to think more creatively about economic diversification and actually putting tradespeople to work, which is what a lot of those energy efficiency investments, particularly on the industrial side, far less on the residential side, actually did for people. And so those were smart allocations of some of the resources that came from carbon pricing. If the more the politics of it had been handled better, that is to say more politically, because in my view, we allowed ourselves to become enamored of Economist Party, giving us all this high-minded advice and all the high priests of charts and graphs coming into the cabinet room to brief us, instead of thinking about it from the perspective of ordinary people trying to pay bills in a time when we were facing mass layoffs in the oil and gas sector, and people, quite frankly, had lower levels of trust in a brand new NDP government at a time when we were facing some pretty strong economic headwinds in the oil and gas industry. And we did not, in my view, come off sounding like it was our priority to fix that. It sounded like our priority in that first year, and I know we're going back a decade now, was, doing green stuff that, people only vaguely understood. Even still, even in the doldrums of popularity, when you looked at some of the internal polling, it was still like kind of a 50-50 proposition, or, at worst kind of a 45 proposition, kind of in favor of some sort of climate action for Alberta. That was the thing that was always astonishing to me. Over time, that changed. But Albertans are not in the first instance or before, an active 10-year-long campaign of sort of chipping away at the consensus around taking climate action. In the first instance, they're not averse to it. And then what you had, sort of a decade hence was carbon pricing crashing up on the rocks of inflation. And it became an easy thing to blame.
Yeah. Shannon absolutely nails it. Like, me as a common man, like the Liberal team, Freeland, everyone, nobody understood the carbon tax when it came out. And why is it even called a tax?
Or at least they didn't communicate it well.
No, it's a rebate. Some people have to pay more, but for me, I look at the numbers as a business guy. I look at all the fuel. I'm getting more money back than I'm spending at the pump, and they just absolutely fucked the dog on this. They did not explain it properly, and it got lost in jargon, and now we're screwed because we can never bring something back. People are just going to be adverse to it forever.
Ken?
Just imagine, again, I said it earlier, but just imagine if every time the carbon tax went up, the GST went down by half a point. Everyone would go, oh, well, that's pretty cool. I save money on everything and I pay a little bit more for gas. It seems like a pretty good trade.
How important is the GST to federal coffers? Like if you shave a point off the GST, what does that do to the budget?
How important is how important is the GST? Like, it's just an offset, right? Like, as you just do it as a 1-for-1. And every time the carbon price went up $5, it's about a half a point in GST. So you just do that over time. And so it doesn't affect the federal balance sheet.
Okay, let me get to the live chat here. Powered by Park Power, Real Talkers can get exclusive deals and discounts on internet, electricity, and natural gas by checking out parkpower.ca/realtalk. Randy in the chat says, I'm so happy to have used the rebate programs and 0% interest loans from the carbon tax to turn my home and business into a producer and 100% electrified. Randy says, no carbon tax fees on natural gas ever again. Tommy Temper says, if you take my money to give some of it back, that's a scam. And I think that Tommy touches on the way that some people feel about this, Shannon and Ken, which was that it just didn't make sense to some people. It didn't make sense that they were going to get back more than they paid in, because that never makes sense. If anybody tells you that, it's kind of has a monorail vibe to it. And so people were automatically cynical and questioned the efficacy of it in the first place.
If you walk into a bar with $2 and a beer costs 50 cents and a shot of whiskey costs $2, and you want to have 4 drinks, you're not going to have a shot of whiskey. And if you raise the price of whiskey to $2.50, you're never going to have whiskey. You're not going to use it anymore. It's even if someone keeps giving you that $2, it's the relative price of things that have carbon in it versus the price of things that don't. This is why the GST idea is such a great one. The price of everything I buy goes down by a little bit, and the price of things that have carbon in it go up. And so I'm going to spend more money on the things that don't have carbon and less money on the things that do have carbon. And that's true even if someone gives me all of my income, because it's the price of some things versus the other things. That's how people make decisions. And that's the decisions we want to affect. We want people to pay a little bit more for the things that have carbon in them and a little less for everything else. And it doesn't matter whether you give someone 100% of the money back that decision is still going to be that decision is still going to be affected if you raise the price of things with carbon in it and you lower the price of everything else. And that's why, in my view, lowering the GST when you raise the carbon price would have not only been the right public policy thing, not only been the right political thing, but it would have demonstrated to people exactly what was going on when you were raising the carbon price.
The fact that took a few minutes to explain is exactly why Economist Party can't be in charge, right?
Nailed it.
But what Ken has done is he's actually provided a pretty elegant political solution. But what he also flags is that this is a federal government problem. And in my view, in the first instance, as the Alberta government putting this forward back in 2015, 2016, we should have just punted it to the feds. Right? If they want to solve the problem, fantastic. And Ken says no because he's a conservative who likes to devolve things.
That's what Jason Kenney did, right? Isn't that what Jason Kenney did?
I'm talking about on the retail side.
Okay.
We should have absolutely owned and ring-fenced the industrial pricing because I think that would have been in Albertans' best interests. Okay. And I think that's a pretty cross-partisan view, conservative to New Democrat. But on the retail side, if you're going to take on the political sort of boat anchor of doing this, then punt it up to the feds to do. So we were a little over our skis, I think, back in the day as a provincial government. But the other thing I'll say is this, is that, it took an awful long time to explain that, and that's fine. When you're the old rule, when you're explaining, you're losing, right? The fact is, though, is that there's only really so many ways to reduce emissions. And it's that way that Ken has just described, which is the most economically efficient and does cost the least if you actually want to take carbon out of the atmosphere. Or there's more expensive solutions. What's coming from conservatives now is that we do nothing, jack shit. And the reason that they are comfortable saying that is because they have chipped away at the consensus in Canada that anything at all has to be done about climate change. It is coded climate denial. And that is where, through, I think, malpractice on all sides, that this conversation has been allowed to be led at a time when also we have a fracturing of the media environment, a fracturing of the public square, a fracturing of political consensus around the existential threat that is climate change.
That's Shannon Phillips. We're talking to Ken Boessenkool as well. Both of them partners at Meredith Boessenkool and Phillips. Make better policy at mbpolicy.com. Where the hell is Tyler Meredith? Where's the Liberal voice? Well, Tyler's working on the Liberal campaign right now, so he's not doing media, but we're grateful to have these two with us. In our live chat, Justin says, even this show, Jespersen, is guilty of dismissing and adding fuel to the fire on the carbon tax disaster, and it's frustrating as hell how dismissive people are about it. Les in our super chat says the only thing that came down in price was fuel and energy. Clothing and groceries gets delivered by carbon, and it hurts people in poverty who do not drive and who lost their carbon rebates. That from Les in our live chat. Let's move on. I wanted to touch on something real quick. Let's not spend too much time on it. Want to get back to the federal election. We've still got to talk about crowd sizes, Carney and China, and we have to talk about the fate of the federal NDP. Interesting video from Jagmeet Singh, and we're going to play it for this audience. But real quick, price of oil hovering around $61. At least that's when I checked on Monday. Alberta budget has it at 68, so $7 off. The Alberta government says for every dollar off its projection, there's a $750 million hit to the province's bottom line. Shannon, you've obviously, and we'll ask both of you this, but how bad of a scenario is this for the USP government right now? Some people are talking about potentially the biggest deficit in Alberta's history. That's a big deal.
I don't know. You'd have to be getting up pretty early in the morning to outweigh Travis Tave's $20 billion deficit in 2020, 2021. So, they tried their best to essentially use COVID to paper over all kinds of things, including buying out the Keystone XL nonsense. Like they just threw money around like they were, down at the club. So I don't think they're going to get that far. The fact is that whenever this happens, and it happens often because it's a commodity and it's we're price takers, that means really, really tough conversations when it comes to funding our public services here in Alberta. And Conservative government will go to almost just our public services aren't safe when this happens, which is why you need to diversify the economy, which is why that, chasing that white whale remains really important for Alberta policymakers. And whenever I see this, I just get really, really worried. I get really worried for our disability services. I get really worried for early education. I get really worried for supports that are flowed through municipalities. All the things that we don't see, everything that's under the iceberg, that is really close to people's lives. People say that it's municipal government that's the closest to people's lives. I disagree. People feel very personally attached to their provincial services. That's why provincial politics was always most interesting to me, because it actually helps people. And when this happens, there is less state capacity to do so.
Ken, quick thought.
I have a hard time believing that a government that never sees a problem they're not willing to throw a crown corporation at, and that delayed a tax cut so they get increased spending on anything else, gives a hoot about what the deficit is. This is not a traditionally conservative government in any way, shape, or form. And add to that they can just blame Trump, and I think they'll just ride it through.
There are some allegations. Foreign interference is something I think that is on Canadians' radar more than usual, of course, including some revelations from CSIS a short while back that we covered on the show. But Mark Carney being dogged by connections to China, and his critics alleging Chinese interference in the Canadian election. Carney says he has never heard of the pro-Beijing group that has him featured on its website. He has been photographed with its leaders. He says he takes photos with leaders everywhere, which is, to a certain degree, too. Politicians have been dogged many times by unfortunate photo ops, and I think to expect them all to know who it is they're being photographed with is a tall order. But how bad is this one potentially or really, Ken?
It's a serious issue, and we should take it very seriously. I was a little disappointed with the way Mark Carney reacted to this issue this week. I think he could have said, I take this very seriously. I will look into it. I'll make sure it doesn't happen. I'm glad we have someone monitoring this stuff in our elections now and doing this stuff in real time. We haven't had that before. But let me just add one more thing. This is the ultimate foreign interference election in my lifetime, because the guy, the orange menace to the south, is literally determining the outcome of the Canadian election. I've been interviewed for a couple of outlets in the United States, and they are surprised at how much Donald Trump is influencing our election. I wouldn't call that foreign interference because it's interfering in everything else. But anyway, two different takes. On the one hand, of course, we should pay more attention to this, and our leaders should take it more seriously. But on the other hand, we have an election right now that's being driven by everything Donald Trump says every day.
Shannon, your thoughts on the Carney-China connection?
Well, I really do think that the Liberal Party of Canada has an issue here. It took them, whatever it was, 48 hours to get rid of the previous candidate, which is this is the epicenter. This scandal is the epicenter of where the previous one was. And it took them forever to just punt that guy off the ballot. And he literally said at an event that his opponent should essentially be rounded up by the Communist Party of Canada and that we should all go get a bounty for it. I mean, it was just beyond the pale. And if there is a Venn diagram between me and Jason Kenney, and it is slim, it is this, which is that I don't think we can tolerate this sort of nonsense. And China is very, very sophisticated in how they interfere in Canadian politics. And I'm not just talking about elections, but the broader information environment, but in influencing individual politicians. So Carney needs to be strong in pushing back on this stuff and separating himself from it. I don't think that the photo is actually the issue. And the photo is, or the issue is all the other details that were in that Fife and Chase piece. I dug into it a little bit last night, and some of it, in typical Fife and Chase kind of fashion, their equal opportunity sort of go straight for the jugular, right? And sometimes it can be a little bit extra. But the fact is that the Liberals have a vulnerability here, which means when you have a vulnerability on something and you're actually managing an issue, you need to overcorrect. Not to just kind of be like, well, I answered the question, okay? Because literally that's how Carney responded after he was sort of pressed on it. I gave you an answer, right? That is absolutely not the tone that he needs to be setting, because he's not just talking to Canadians when he's answering these questions. He's also talking to the Chinese consular staff. He's also talking to Beijing, right? And what he needs to be sending the message of is, I am going to push back strongly. If any of my folks are messing around, they will get kicked out. And that there is actually a wall between Canadian politics and Canadian public policy and the Communist Party of China.
That's Shannon Phillips. Shannon and Ken joining us every Friday. You're not off the hook yet, you two. We've still got a couple of stories to cover. Meredith Boessenkool and Phillips, mbpolicy.com is where you can find these two. When we come back from this 60-second break, we're going to take a look at Pierre Poilievre digging in, doubling down on boasting about crowd sizes. Will it help him or hurt him at the end of the day? Plus, what is the future of the federal NDP? Like, even post-election, it'll take some prediction, some prognostication here, but I might consider Shannon, at least to some degree, emotionally invested. I say that with a smile. We'll find out her take, what she thinks is going to happen here. First, if you are a policy wonk, if you are someone who pays close attention to global affairs or politics even closer to home, and you can see yourself maybe making a career of it, you can check out Canada's Open University. Explore the different post-secondary options that are waiting for you at Athabasca University. Now, the beautiful part about AU is that you set your own course, and that means schedule. It means when you're writing your exams or completing your assignments, you can work ahead. You can pump the brakes if real life happens and your parents or your kids need you, or maybe you're just going to go take a break somewhere hot for a while. Open your options with the online offerings at Athabasca University. You can check out their programs and courses today at athabascau.ca. Learn more about student supports, including financial supports, and learn why more than 92% of AU alumni report they're in a job related to their field of study. If you're looking to get serious in the job market, your best move right now is checking out athabascau.ca. If your best move is to find employment, you're a skilled laborer, you're a talented salesperson, maybe you're the best HR manager anybody's ever met in their life, Kubi Renewable Energy is always growing their team. You can learn more about their Solar by Kubi branch, celebrating 10 years in business this year by giving away two $5,000 gifts to two Kubi customers. Those names are going to be drawn out of a barrel at their summer solstice party on the 20th of June. You can get a free quote today for Kubi solar installs at kubi.ca, but if you check out their careers link, that's where you could find the post that could change your life. New opportunities lie in wait in Calgary, Edmonton, Kamloops, and Lethbridge for electricians, design experts, engineers, apprentice electricians, and more. That's the careers link you can check out today at kubi.ca. And Complete Care Restoration reminding you with this talk about climate change, this talk about natural disasters. If, heaven forbid, something interrupts the regular course of, well, everyday life at your home or business this summer, maybe it's a burst pipe, maybe it's a sewer backup, whatever it is, don't let it get worse. Don't let it sit there. And if you don't know what you're doing, don't try to fix it yourself. Get in touch with the team at Complete Care Restoration. For more than 25 years, they've been restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind.
Shout out to Wendy Hall, new Real Talk member on our YouTube.
Ooh.
You can head over to our YouTube homepage and hit join right beside subscribe to get in on all those perks.
That's got to be Jasper counselor Wendy Hall. Do you think? How cool is that? A shout out to everybody out in Jasper. What a great weekend to be out in Jasper National Park. Pierre Poilievre rallied thousands in Hamilton, Ontario, like 4,000 or 5,000 people. We talked to Politico's Nick Taylor-Vasey about it, and then a short time later, about a week later, week and a half maybe, he rallied more than 10,000. So say the reports, some estimating as high as 15,000 to a warehouse just south of Edmonton in Nisku, Alberta. Obviously, a flex, as Stephen Harper endorsed the Conservative leader to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. But it's been Pierre Poilievre's comments since about the rally that have raised some eyebrows. We'll put it in front of our two experts here in just a second, but here's Pierre Poilievre's interaction with journalist Laura Stone.
Hi, Mr. Poilievre. Laura Stone, Globe and Mail. I want to ask about...
How'd you like our rally last night?
Well, I wanted to ask about your rallies.
Thank you.
And whether size matters. I actually...
One last question. When was the last time we had a rally that big in Canada?
I don't know. I've never been to a political rally that big, I don't think.
You know a lot about politics.
Well,
You're a very well-informed person. I know that if there were a bigger rally than that, you would know about it.
Ken, your thoughts on this strategy? It kind of feels like
it's just so gross. I have some female friends who cringe, visibly cringe when Pierre is interacting with Laura Stone, who I know as one of the most decent, hardworking journalists in the country, the most fair journalists in the country. Pierre Poilievre's fundamental problem in this election is that people want someone to deal with Trump. They don't want someone that sounds like Trump. And when he does this bragging, when he treats women this way, he looks, sounds, and smells like Trump. It's an enormous problem. It's an enormous own goal. He didn't have to go there. He shouldn't have gone there. And if he does this on an ongoing basis, his polling numbers are going to fall. His gender gap right now are as big as any gender gap I've seen. I've been working with conservative politicians for a long time. His gender gap on over 55, which is like absolutely critical to win an election, as my friend Corey tonight has been saying, his gender gap with over 55 women is just ginormous. And so I'm going to use the word Corey used, which is it's gross.
Shannon?
Well, yeah, it's super cringe, creepy. I don't think I've been talked to like that since I was, 25 at the bar. It's been a long time. And I don't know a woman who hasn't had an experience like that of like just, like super off-putting, right? And that creepy Ron DeSantis smile, it makes it even worse. Yeah. Pierre Poilievre has big rallies, and he really wants you to talk about it, and he really wants you to know about the size of his rallies. But when you have, 11, 12, however many thousands of people south of Edmonton in a Nisku hangar, that is a whole bunch of people who are not knocking on doors in South Edmonton where you've got seats in play. And where the Conservative Party of Canada hasn't typically had the strongest of ground games because they don't have to. And neither has the UCP in Edmonton because the NDP has won those seats and they have a fairly, weak organization there. And so, there's an opportunity cost here when you're doing this, you're not doing that. No question they had to roll Stephen Harper out at some point to address that gap, and particularly older voters, even with older male voters that the Conservative Party Canada has now. So they had to do that. If Edmonton's the right place for that, then fine. But the fixation on rallies, and I use that word deliberately, and rally size is potentially coming at the expense of other things. And in particular, your ground game. And so sometimes you use rallies to, show momentum or that kind of thing, but you certainly don't use them as an overall communications exercise to like bludgeon the media over the head with it. Pierre Poilievre has a problem with women. And clearly, I don't think he would have talked to a man like that. I really don't, with that like creepy ass smile. So, maybe women are just picking up something that he inherently has.
Well,
I've been flagging this for a while now, right? That like, and you don't see, a team around him. Like if you've got a huge gender gap, if you've got a gap on like who's best to stand up to Trump, but also a gap in trust on other issues with women, then why aren't some of the talented women in his caucus around him, helping him do announcements, doing some of the B tour, all of these things that he could be doing to advance messages that he's not doing. Instead, it's just all him all the time. And when he, goes off script, he just fundamentally, to Ken's observation on it being gross, comes off as sort of a broken guy.
Kenzie's in our chat. Kenzie says, Ryan, could you show the clip? We don't have it on demand, Kenzie, but I'll describe it. She says, Ryan, could you show the clip of Pierre Poilievre listening to the friends and sisters of a murdered woman who was a victim of domestic violence? Kenzie went on to say in an earlier comment, she says, misogynistic. She says, Laura Stone was the one who asked the question. She was the one who asked, does size matter? Ken, you're shaking your head.
She asked the question. But before she asked the question, Poilievre asked this thing. Can I make a separate point very quickly?
Whatever you want.
This was the worst day that Carney had in this campaign. In the morning, Pierre Poilievre made an announcement saying he was going to crack down on foreign tax havens, crack down on some of the things that Carney has used in his personal planning, or that he's been accused of using. And later in the day, when the journalist asked Mark Carney about it, he totally fluffed the answer. The story coming out of that day, the story we should be discussing today, if Pierre Poilievre had not done what he did to Laura Stone, the story we'd be talking about today is, where is Mark Carney's investments? Where is he filing his income tax? But we're not talking about that story because Pierre Poilievre blew the worst day that Carney's had since his campaign begun by talking to Laura Stone in the way he talked to Laura Stone. And I just see the reaction of the women in my life when he's talked that way. I don't need to say any more than that. But he stepped on the the worst day Carney's had. And, Carney must go home every night going, whoo, dodged a bullet there. Thanks, Pierre.
And to this point about, that came up in the chat about, some of his better retail political skills and ability to connect to voters. All well and good, but that's not what's in the window. Why? Because of interactions like the one that he had and the one that he had with Judy Trin from CTV, where he called her a protester for asking a question. And ultimately, they've got a really tight media control, right? 4 questions a day. They decide which outlets get to ask them, no follow-ups, et cetera, and so on. So he's not letting them in. He's doing that for 2 reasons. Number one, they constructed their campaign in the first instance as a front runner, and he's not a front runner anymore, so he's got to change, and he hasn't, and that's been the entire problem since February, and why their numbers have nosedived. But number two, because the strategy is built on his way of looking at things, on where accessible voters are, which is in those far right corners of the world, highly male corners of the world that are not consuming mainstream media. He's got to change now, because he's got a problem with voters who do consume mainstream media, who do want to see some of the things that that the commenter talked about in the chat. They want to see his more human side, and because they've constructed this tightly wound, both sort of strategically and ideologically, really closed to mainstream media and closed to kind of that give and take that folks want to see now. They've done this to themselves, and their inability to change has been the story since probably early March, and to adapt to new circumstances, and it's going to be their undoing if the polls hold the way they are right now.
If the polls hold the way that they are, the federal NDP is in real trouble. And I'm not just talking about Election Day. We're talking about what could look kind of like a scorched earth reality on April 29th and moving forward. Jagmeet Singh, the leader, has just released a video. It's about 2 minutes. We're going to play it in its entirety, in the assumption that some Real Talkers have not seen or heard it. And then we'll go over to Shannon and Ken as we wrap up this Friday roundtable with 2 of the 3 partners at Meredith, Boessenkool, and Phillips. Here's NDP leader Jagmeet Singh.
Now is the time to keep Canada, Canada. We are who we are because we take care of each other. We know that Donald Trump and his illegal trade war hurts workers and their families. And it's gonna matter who's in Ottawa fighting for you. A Canada where one party holds all the power means cuts to the very things that make us who we are. Voters are saying no to Pierre Poilievre's plans to cut services and bring in American-style healthcare. And I will never support a minority government led by Pierre Poilievre. Canadians won't let him win, and neither will New Democrats. Mark Carney says that over the next 3 years, he will cut spending on the things you care about. His plan is to cut from the budget for healthcare to pay for building infrastructure. He wants to lay off the people who provide the services we need, and he wants to make these cuts while also letting people who make over $1 million a year pay less taxes. That's why we need New Democrats in Parliament, to defend the things that make us Canadian. In the last election, we promised dental care and pharmacare. You elected 25 strong New Democrats, and we got it done because you voted for us. We will make life easier for regular people with national rent control, a cap on grocery prices, and a family doctor for every Canadian. As a part of Team Canada, we will stand up to Donald Trump by supporting retaliatory tariffs. We will fight to get support for workers impacted by the trade war, and we will never let any government trade away our healthcare, water, or the rights of Indigenous people just to get a deal with Donald Trump. But we can only do that if you vote NDP. Canada works best when we don't just have 2 parties trading power back and forth. Canada works best when there are enough New Democrats elected to stand up for you, not the billionaires. If you vote NDP, we'll work to build our kind of Canada, just like we always have.
Is that the Armageddon soundtrack in the background? It's so...
anything with cello behind it.
It's like 300, the movie?
Anything with cello and then violins will get anybody fired up to a certain degree. Shannon, your insight into this specific... what's the nuance? What do you find in this video, and what does it say to Canadians?
Well, it says that they're trying to shore up their incumbents, and that when you reelect New Democrats, then you're going to get a focus on some of the stuff that hasn't necessarily been in focus during this campaign, right? The services that people rely on, in particular healthcare, but other services as well. And I think it's the best of a bunch of like really pretty shitty options for the federal NDP war room. They had to do something to basically shore up the support for their incumbents and withstand what is essentially shaping up to be a red wave. So hopefully the incumbents have done their part in their own ground game, serving their constituents and becoming relevant in their communities so that they can withstand it. I have been that person who has had to build a seat in order to withstand a wave. I know how hard it is, but I also know that the work is actually pretty straightforward, and I think some of them, people like Heather McPherson, probably have done that. But the war room had very few options at this point to arrest what looks like a pretty existential slide into potential loss of party status and therefore a time in the wilderness for the party.
Of course, Heather McPherson, Edmonton Strathcona incumbent. We'll talk about Blake Desjardins in a quick minute, but Ken, your thoughts?
It's brilliant. It's brilliant, and it's delivered at exactly the right time. It's too long, but I'm sure they have a 30-second version or a 15-second version that they can play on TV. Here's why it's brilliant. Every day of this campaign, I've woken up to Liberal numbers going up and Conservative numbers going down. Every day I've woken up to a reason why the Liberal numbers are going up and the Conservative numbers going down. If we come out of the debate next week and the Liberals are in the high 40s and the Conservatives are in the low 30s, all of those New Democrats that flew over to Carney to stop Pierre Poilievre will not have a reason to fly over to Carney to stop Poilievre, because Poilievre won't have a chance of forming the next government. They are planting a seed that they need enough Canadians to hear. They're preparing them for the possibility, which, given where polls have been, is not an inconceivable possibility, that after the debates, if Canadians decide that the person they want to deal with Trump is not the person who sounds like Trump, then this strategy will yield a surprising number of New Democrat seats. Look, I was in Harper's campaign room when Jack Layton did the 2011 Orange Wave, and those numbers came up really, really fast, really, really late. And so it's possible for New Democrats. Now, I would say, unfortunately for the New Democrats, Jagmeet Singh is no Jack Layton. But look, he's been around for a while. But I just think it's brilliant. It's the only play they have. They played it well. They've got to shorten the video. They've got to put whatever money they have behind it to prepare for the possibility that the trends in this election continue for another week.
Okay, I want to put something on your radar as we close. I'm just seeing this for the first time right now. This is pretty wild, okay? Blake Desjardins will be fine. He's Edmonton's other NDP member of Parliament, and Kerry Diotte has stormed back into the mix. The former newspaper columnist wants to be a Conservative MP again. So we get a note from Real Talker Michael. Okay, we're talking about vote splitting here. We're talking about the progressive vote, and Michael writes into the show, and he says, I was curious about the Liberal candidate in Edmonton-Griesbach who may be inadvertently helping Kerry Diotte win the riding by splitting the vote with Blake. And so Michael says, check out Patrick Lennox's website. Patrick Lennox is the Liberal candidate for Edmonton-Griesbach. Michael says the links to his social media are weird. His Facebook doesn't appear to be him. Twitter's not him. Instagram is a dead link. He says, I get this guy wasn't a candidate 2 weeks ago, but he says, come on, Liberals, give your head a shake. He says, I thought that Real Talkers might find this curious as well. Check this out. So we're at Patrick Lennox's campaign page. It says he's an expert in Canada-U.S. relations, but just check this out alone. On his official page at patricklennox.liberal.ca, you want to connect with him on Facebook, it takes you to Patrick Lennox in Pensacola, Florida, originally from Kingston, Jamaica, whose most recent post is a Barry White video, I've got so much to give. Which actually kind of does feel like maybe a bit of a campaign song.
I mean, great tune.
If you go back and then you want to connect with the candidate on X, on Twitter, you go and there's a profile there with 2 followers following 0 that has never posted. And then if you go click on the Instagram link, there literally is no profile. What the fuck is going on?
There's some 14-year-old in Edmonton that's laughing his ass off and saying, I just made Jespersen, man.
What is
this? What's going on? I mean, let's not ascribe to malevolence what we can very reasonably ascribe to incompetence here, people. Okay. What's going on is it's some guy that they threw on the ballot, right? Very clearly. And this happens, with all parties to greater and lesser degrees. Sometimes they get elected. Remember Ruth Ellen Brosseau in 2011, and she became an excellent member of parliament for 2 terms in Quebec, and is actually running again. But sometimes you just have what we call knobs in the business, and this looks like a knob to me. And people should act accordingly. Blake's been a good member of parliament, and again to this point about let's make sure that there's a group of New Democrats who can win that get sent back to the House to schlep away in the salt mines, standing up for things like healthcare and all the things that New Democrats care about.
All right, we have kept you two way longer than we asked for, but sorry, not sorry. This has been a fantastic episode. Shannon Phillips and Ken Boessenkool are both partners at Meredith Boessenkool Phillips. Make better policy at mbpolicy.com. Because of the Good Friday Easter break, we'll be talking to the two of you next Thursday, and we look forward to it.
So do we.
Thanks you two. Appreciate it. That is pretty wild, hey? That's this is an official, this is so funny. We've probably talked more about Patrick Lennox now, the Liberal candidate in Edmonton-Griesbach, than either of the actual candidates. Yeah. Blake, who is the incumbent member of Parliament, and as far as I can tell, has done a decent enough job. I can't say I focus too much on his personal initiatives. He represents him well on social media. And Kerry Diotte, who, after losing the last election, has just been chomping at the bit to get back. You've probably noticed that he defeated Edmonton City Councillor, now Edmonton's Deputy Mayor, Karen Principe, who's sort of filling in while Amarjeet Sohi campaigns. She wanted to be the Conservative nominee in Edmonton-Griesbach, but Kerry Diotte came back and beat her. So that's the story there. But this is amazing. The Facebook page in particular, like the Barry White, I've got so much to give. But yeah, this is definitely not the same guy.
I agree with Ken.
And
this
Patrick
has to be
Lennox,
a hack, right? This has to be.
Look at this. Never get too attached to someone because attachments lead to expectations. I don't think a political candidate is going to have that on their official profile. No. Don't get attached because attachments lead to expectations. We don't want that. We don't want that at all. A shout out, by the way, it turns out that it is Jasper Town Council's Wendy Hall that has joined our YouTube members, which is great. And she followed up by letting us know that Marmot Basin has received 11 more centimeters. 11 centimeters of fresh overnight. You guys, this is I think off the top of my head, I might be a little wrong on the math. Don't hold me to it, but they've received approximately 120 centimeters over the past 2 weeks in April, which is unbelievable. The forecast is going to be amazing. You can check out skimarmot.com for more on that. And the Fairmont JPL has 25% off all their bookings till the end of the year right now, which is an amazing opportunity. Check out our Wednesday episode. That'll be April 9th for My Jasper Memories, and you can go to the show notes of our April 9th episode for the direct link to book at the JPL.
Yeah, they got a big weekend in Jasper. They're having that big party at the base of the mountain this weekend. One of my buddies is Bradley James. Shout out, is DJing. It's still happening in Jasper. I know here looks like spring, but you can still get out there and ride some fresh pow up in Jasper.
Goose on our live chat says, I'm going to get a little personal here, by the way, everybody. I'm going to tell you a funny story. Goose says it's been a nice handful of years not having to think of Kerry Diotte. Kerry Diotte back in the day was interesting. He was a very well, a lot of people read his column when he was a city hall correspondent essentially for the Sun, right? And he would poke and prod, and he was doing his job, maybe being a bit of an antagonist, and the cops really didn't like him. You remember this story? This was right around the time I was moving to Edmonton. This happened, but there's a bar. It's called the Provincial now on the White Mud in Edmonton. It used to be called. I'm drawing a blank right now. What was it called? Remember, there was one on the south side, one on the north side. The real talkers will help me out. Where did Kerry Diotte? Cops tried to set him up for a DUI.
Oh, I don't.
It was called Overtime, wasn't it called Overtime?
Okay.
And so the rumor was not the rumor. This is what happened. So Kerry Diotte's in there, and he's having a few drinks, and police officers, I don't remember the exact nuance, but it became known to Edmonton police officers that Diotte was in the bar. And so they were setting up a sting operation. Now listen, nobody's saying Kerry Diotte was going to drive drunk. So, okay, there's that for sure, or drive impaired. But also nobody tolerates. We don't think drinking and driving is cool. So you want to see, like, if you see a check stop out, okay, fair enough. The cops are doing their job. But it is absolutely unethical for police officers to target an individual.
Were they called? Was someone at the bar call and say this guy's drunk, his car's here?
No, it was law enforcement internally. Like the Edmonton police chief had to ultimately pay for this. This is a huge deal for the Edmonton Police Service. But it was and I mean, this is a person that's lower on the staff list. I have been this person in the Calgary Herald newsroom back in 1999. This was me sitting there at the assignment desk listening to the police scanner. And this is how you make sure you get
You're one of those.
Well, you get your exactly. That's how you get your photographers or your videographers out to the scene right away. There's a dog in the river, or there's a house on fire, or cops have pulled, somebody's flipped their car off the bridge, and so you listen to the scanner. That's how you figure out. Well, one of the Edmonton Sun staffers was listening to the scanner and heard cops coordinating this sting operation. They were going to try to bust Diotte when he came out of the bar. So then they call the bar and they let Diotte know there's basically a sting operation. The cops are waiting outside for you. Don't drive your car. Don't leave. Don't whatever. And so that was kind of how I came to know Kerry Diotte. This story's already way too long. So when we came to Edmonton, so I'm like, okay, Kerry Diotte is the journalist that the cops tried to bust for his speaking out against the police. So I kind of, in a way, I won't say that I had canonized him, but I kind of felt like, okay, this guy's kind of paid the price for being gutsy at his job. So I had some respect for Kerry Diotte, right? Well, then I get into this beef with another city councillor. I can't remember his name. Gosh, he ran for mayor. He got his ass kicked. I can't even remember the guy's name. But I had a beef with this guy. Kerry Diotte didn't like it. At the time, I'm working at a terrestrial radio station, and I had an endorsement, what proved to be a bit of an unfortunate endorsement, Real Talk, helping sell My Pillow. You know this one? You know My Pillow? The CEO of My Pillow, Mike Lindell, the biggest Trump guy of all time, and actually just an absolute riot. Probably pretty dangerous, too. So at the time, I'm selling these My Pillows. We're in Jasper as a family, okay? And it's literally 3 a.m. Literally. Our dog Moses, he wanted to get outside. Moses always loved Jasper. He wanted to go for walks at 2 or 3 a.m. So I throw Moses on a leash, and I'm out at 3 a.m. There's nothing like being outside in Jasper at 3. Keep your dogs on a leash, because you're quite likely to run into a bull elk at 3 a.m. You can run into animals. So I'm out there walking, and all of a sudden my phone starts to buzz at 3 a.m. And I'm like, what is going on right now? And it's Kerry Diotte, at that time a sitting member of parliament, a conservative member of parliament, blowing me up on Twitter at either 3 a.m. Mountain Time or 5 a.m. Eastern Time in Ottawa, ripping me, saying, why don't you keep your mouth shut and focus on selling more pillows? Wow. And Diotte's just taking an absolute run at me. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking back to the days when he was drinking at overtime and the cops were setting him up for a sting operation, and wondering, is the exact same thing happening here right now? And should his own staff perhaps try to rein him in as he's taking big runs at radio hosts at 3 a.m. for their pillow endorsements? That's my Kerry Diotte story, everybody. He could be, again, a member of parliament if he knocks down Blake Desjardins and Edmonton Griesbaugh. But what an unbelievable and wild time that was. That's a riding we'll keep an eye on. And Michael, Real Talker Michael, thanks for putting the story on our radar of the Liberal candidate who is definitely not who his website would portray him to be in Edmonton Griesbaugh. Fascinating stuff. Before we get to the Flamethrower, this edition, this week is going to be hotter than we're used to, and that's saying something. I want to make sure that Edmonton Opera is on your radar, Real Talkers. They have just released details on their 2025-26 season, and it is all about legacy. Yeah, that's right. Some legacies are passed down, others must be claimed, and our friends at Edmonton Opera celebrate that through their 2025-26 season with season tickets or build your own season available right now. You can explore the season by checking out edmontonopera.com. It opens with Bravi, that's opera's greatest hits, in partnership with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra. Coming up, that kicking off the season at the Winspear Centre October 9th and 11th. In February, audiences will witness the world premiere of Indians on Vacation at the Northern Alberta Jubilee Auditorium, a poignant and comedic new opera based on Thomas King's novel of the same name. And the season wraps with the 3rd chapter of Wagner's legendary Ring cycle, Siegfried, an epic tale of heroism and fate, performed at the McLab Theatre at the Citadel at the end of May 2026. The 2025-26 season subscriptions are on sale now at edmontonopera.com. Well, we're talking about classy and refined taste. You don't need to try very hard to segue from the opera to California Closets. If you want to experience the finest, the best, elevated installations with custom closets and storage solutions for your entire home, look no further than California Closets of Canada. Proudly Canadian-owned and operated, with everything manufactured right here in Alberta, including their incomparable garage storage systems, Murphy beds that can turn a home office into a guest room, entertainment centers, that's what we had them do for us, and of course, walk-in closets like you've never seen before. California Closets does it all, custom designed to fit your space and your budget. I bet you there's somebody out there going, I don't think I could afford a California Closet. Request a free consultation with their designer, tell them what you're looking at, and they'll put a plan in front of you, guaranteed for life. It all starts with a visit to californiaclosets.ca. And we've been so proudly shining a spotlight on UCAN Youth Services through 2025. In this edition, today's mention, I want to focus specifically on their relentless outreach workers. These are team members at UCAN who are doing amazing things, helping 12 to 17-year-olds turn things around. This is a top 50 list. The 12 to 17-year-olds, the 50 of them that are most frequently interacting with Edmonton's police officers, not a good situation. Well, UCAN Youth Services relentless outreach workers are on this, creating relationships, making sure that these young people can get back in school if the situation calls for it. If they require housing, that happens. If they need a hot lunch, that they make that happen as well. It's all about creating opportunities and reducing incidents of disruption and crime, moving these young people toward employment or education. It's a program in partnership with the Alberta government, the Edmonton Police, Reach Edmonton, and the United Way. If you feel compelled to make a donation today, or if you know a young person that could use a referral to UCAN, you can check out their website today at ucan.ca.
I know you want to hit up the Flamethrower, but we should, before we get out on this week, we should play that Trump clip of him patting his billionaire buddies on the back. Yeah, just quickly, because it's going to cap the week.
It's only like 10 seconds, but this is Donald Trump in the Oval Office. So as you know, the markets dropped on Monday. This was the tariff news. It was everything. And of course, since then, these tariffs have kind of been paused. 10% blanket tariffs in the meantime. 125% aimed at China. China's fired back, by the way, with 125% aimed at the States.
China.
But it's what Donald Trump said in front of rolling cameras, which is particularly interesting about how much money his friends made when the markets bounced back on Wednesday, that has everybody talking.
This is Charles Schwab. It's not just a company, it's actually an individual. And he made $2.5 billion today, and he made $900 million. That's not bad. He's a financial.
Yeah, he made.
So if you didn't hear it, he
Charles
said
Schwab.
One guy made $2.2 billion, and the other guy made $900 million. And I'm like, why are you saying this live on?
How about that, right? He
camera.
Goes, yeah, this is Charles Schwab, not just a company; it's a real guy, and he made $2.5 billion, and this guy made $900 million. Sitting there going, this is not going to help. With the narrative that Trump is only doing this to benefit his billionaire buddies.
The people who wanted lower egg prices did not make millions.
They did not make millions. That's 100% true. You know, as we wrap up every week, courtesy of our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, the most engaged real talkers in the land submit their hottest takes by way of emails to talk@ryanjespersen.com and comments on our YouTube episodes as well. This is the Flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. We got this one from Nesen, who writes in and says, Ryan, Pierre Poilievre is still borrowing political lines from the golden-haired man south of the border who did that to detract people from the real issues or his lack of good policy. As voters, issues are what should be most important, not name-calling, not crazy slogans, and not snide comments. The more that Poilievre reminds us of the President of the United States, the more we will doubt his leadership ability. I want him to talk real policy. I want him to talk real solutions. Otherwise, Trump will wrap Pierre around his finger and run circles around him. That from Nesen. What about this one from AJ, who says, Jespo, what the hell are you talking? How do you figure that issuing carbon tax rebates just ahead of the election are a gray area? They collected the tax for Q1, and we are owed the rebate. Election or not, we are owed it. What difference does it really make if it's paid out during the election run or if they hold off until May? The people still know, or at least they should, that it's coming one last time this spring and then no more. AJ says this is a non-issue. AJ, agree to disagree. What about this one from Ms. B? This is a YouTube comment. She says, honestly, let's use critical thinking for a hypothetical here. She's talking about Wayne Gretzky putting his neck out there. We were talking about that the morning after Alex Ovechkin scored .895. You had kind of a Putin-Trump thing going on there. Ms. B says, if Canada were to be annexed, Wayne Gretzky wouldn't suffer or struggle in any way. He would lose nothing. On the side of Canadians, we could lose our sovereignty. Essentially, we would lose everything, and that's a fact. What a privilege it must be to not have to take a threat seriously because the outcome will not in any way disrupt your life. And I truly don't say that with bitterness. It's just a plain, harsh reality. And good for Wayne Gretzky. But the rest of us who could lose our sovereignty, plain hard facts, we don't have that privilege. This is not a hysterical political thing. It's a real life sovereignty thing. And we've always supported Gretzky. And now when we need his support, he's showing his support for the person that's trying to take our sovereignty. It is what it is, and we should respond accordingly. So stop making excuses for Wayne. He's a grown man, not a child who needs his hand held on this. Maybe he doesn't owe us an explanation, but he needs to shoulder the realistic and justified consequences for his actions. Ms. B says, I never support vandalism either, but why is it minimized to this political issue? It goes far beyond at that point. She's talking about whoever it is that smeared shit all over the Gretzky statue in Edmonton. How about this one from Cam, who wrote in on YouTube after Max Fawcett joined us, talking about Preston Manning and going back to the well of conservative discontent with Ottawa and all this talk about separation. Cam, on the flip side, says maybe it's the decades-long liberal propaganda that's been holding back Alberta's potential by telling us that everything we do is bad, Max, like pipelines, like oil sands, and everything else. Cam says, I'm a federalist, but I for sure see the anger and frustration that many people have. How about this one from Brandon, who wrote in when we were talking about separation, Alberta sovereignty, and how folks feel about it. We were talking about some polling numbers, right? And it shows that about 28% of Albertans are keen on leaving Canada. About 30% of Albertans want to leave if the Liberals are elected again. Brandon says, Jespo, your conservative numbers, those aren't small odds. He says, let's say it's 25%. That's 1 in 4 Albertans, and that number could probably go up. The feds have spent the last 10 years attacking Alberta's single largest industry that employs most people in this province. That's not true, by the way. He says, do you really think that we can afford a 4th Liberal term? What benefit would we get from being in Confederation? Brandon says, if Alberta were independent, we would have more land than 79% of all nations. We would have more farmland than 91% of all nations. We would be one of the most prosperous and free nations on earth. We would have a larger GDP than 80% of all nations. We would have a population larger than 33% of all nations. We would have a higher GDP per capita than 97% of all nations. And we would be the masters of our destiny. Well, guess what, Brandon? We wanted to fact check your claims, and so we ran them through the Real Talk fact checker. And Johnny, would you please put up the numbers? It turns out that the numbers that Brandon has presented are for the most part very true. Alberta would have more land than 79% of all other nations. We would have more farmland. That's mostly true. We would have one of the most prosperous and free nations on earth. Likely true. We would have a larger GDP than 80% of all nations. Mostly true. A population larger than a third. True. A higher GDP per capita than 97%. True. And masters of our destiny, our Real Talk fact checkers have let us know that's a matter of opinion. But Brandon, your opinion is duly noted. And that was a great email. Still doesn't change my mind. My Canada includes Alberta, but you can let us know what you think anytime to talk@ryanjespersen.com. And the next time you're visiting a DQ in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, or on Baseline Road to pick up one of those Flamethrower signature stack burgers, you make sure you let them know that Real Talk sent ya. Coming up on Monday, all the way through till Thursday of next week, we've got you covered with in-depth election analysis as we inch our way toward the 28th of April. That Monday is Election Day here in Canada. Make sure you tell your friends about what we're doing here on the show. Share it, like it, review it. We thank you for that. And Real Talk patrons, I hope to see you on the 17th at our Real Talk debate night viewing party. Check your inbox for details. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, Website design, Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.